You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello, and welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Today we have Nicolas Breedlove. He built NVB Playgrounds into an industry powerhouse, disrupting safety, scaling fast, and rebuilding the culture after betrayal. Welcome, Nicolas.
Oh, I appreciate you having me here today.
I'm thrilled to have you here. I'm really excited to talk about how you built your company from $5,000 to $58 million without outside investors. So I'd love to hear if you could start unpacking that a bit. How did that happen?
Absolutely. We started in a recession, and you just keep growing and growing, and there's a certain point where your systems, as you scale, they just aren't ready to catch up with you. And we were building this company and just explosive growth, and we doubled and doubled and doubled. And I thought, this is great. We're building this amazing playground company. We've got all these great employees. We go from inside of a bedroom to now we're in warehouses and operations. And, we thought, everything looks great. The team is improving, sales are going up, and, the culture, it seemed fine at the time. We had hit a little plateau of sales, and what I didn't realize, like for me, our next biggest stage of growth would come at a betrayal. It was a big betrayal for me. And it was a point where I had to kind of rebuild our company. And it's one of those moments, a little bit of shame goes into that. I hate it. And I had a lot of shame for a long time about our betrayal. It was one of the people that I trusted most. He was doing some interesting things, to say the least.
What happened? What was he doing? Share that with us.
So to start from the top, I guess, you had more than one. You had two employees, but there was one main instigator. But they were recording, and you think, why would they be recording thousands of hours of meetings and calls? We're a playground company. That's all we are. It wasn't to protect themselves. After the lawsuit started and everything else, you realize they were doing that to build leverage. They were siphoning off revenue. They had started up shell distributorships. So we sell a lot of our playground equipment through distributor programs. Basically, other entrepreneurs out there in the world that are selling our product. And they had started a few of these that didn't exist in the real world. But they were using our leads to then force that revenue through them. So they would get commissions for their sales, and then they would get them from selling these directly. So they were taking revenue from our other good distributors, because that is something we do differently than pretty much everybody in this business, is we give distributors a real place to make a living. And, how'd they make it happen? Like, how did that go? The cover story, like why all these recordings? So if you really get down to that, they'd onboard a distributor, and they would hit the record button with accounting, and they'd say, to bypass controls, they would say, an urgent plea. We need to get this person set up right now. And if we don't do it now, we're going to lose this business. And what we, found out over the court cases, they would use that. They were that smart. They were using those instances to say, well, they let this distributor in and they didn't even check them. So why would it matter that they didn't check us? So they didn't check the companies we owned. Well, they didn't check this company too. So they were using these things to. It's a very interesting strategic play to help guys their misgivings, if you would, if that makes sense.
This is so masterminded. It sounds like they've done this before to me.
It does. It sounds like they grew up around it.
That's
they would use that evidence and say, see, this is how we always do it. This is how NVB always does this. They didn't just find loopholes, right? They built a fake door and they convinced people at the company to walk through it with them.
So it's a lot of just it's persuasion, really, and conning people within the company.
That gentleman was a very good persuader.
Wow.
It's very interesting because I think the number one thing I learned back then about scaling and getting to where we were was like some people in the company knew something was off. And it breaks my heart that they didn't have a place to be able to say something, right? They didn't feel like they could.
Wow.
Right? Some people didn't know necessarily how deep the scam went, right? They didn't necessarily know what lines were being crossed, but they knew that something didn't feel right.
But they didn't feel safe to say something to you, like something's not.
They didn't feel safe. Well, not everybody just wants to go up to Nick. Not everybody wants to go. You don't always want to just take every complaint if you're straight to the CEO, right? Not if the CEO has hired this guy to help manage sales and operations, right? You don't want, or whatever department that might have been. I'm not going to say specifically what department that was, but whatever that was. So people didn't feel safe. And what I did was I created an environment where people can't speak up. And what happened? They covered up.
Oh, because they were scared. There was, So now it's interesting that you're going into this because betrayal in businesses happens a lot. And people don't want to talk about it because they feel so ashamed that they were so dumb it happened to them. But they're not dumb because there's a lot of shysters out there. And there's a lot of not well-meaning people that are not honest. So you got through this. How much money did you lose?
It's hard to quantify. This gentleman did a really great job of hiding his activity and making sure that his activity, once he was ready to be gone, there was a lot of stuff that I don't even want to talk. I mean, it's not that I don't want to talk about it. I just can't talk about it.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a certain line that I know legally. Like when I wrote my book, I knew legally that I had to have one chapter looked over by legal because we have an agreement that, because we won our court case.
You have a certain, I understand.
Yeah. So there's a certain level I'm allowed to talk about, but there's some things like some of those details, those dark details.
You can't, because somebody would figure out, they could look at the history.
Who this was.
Yes. Agreed. Okay. So you lost a lot of money. You don't know how much. You won.
Hundreds of thousands.
Okay. All right. Oh, well, at least it wasn't millions. I thought it was in the millions. Okay. So from this, let's talk about, how, first of all, I missed the part where you got from 5,000 and onwards. How did somebody start with 5,000 and then build that up before the betrayal?
I'd say you go really slow, and every dollar had to be spent. Like, you spend money like you're broke.
Right.
And that's how I think as a company, we've kind of been able to survive a lot of the weird things that have happened in the world because we never survive like we're rich. We always survive like we're poor. And, we're not out there buying a margarita machine for the kitchen, right? We're thinking about what is it that we absolutely do? We need this or don't we? And people get really pissy about it too, because it's like, well, it's just a $100 purchase. It's just $1,000 purchase. It's just a $50,000. What's the limit, right? How many $100 purchases equate to 100,000? How many $1,000 purchases? So that kind of mindset helped us grow stably, where we had enough profits to keep moving, because our business, we have to reinvest a ton of the money. On average, right now, we have extended somewhere between $18 and $25 million in credit in any one day. And so we operate like a bank,
right?
Except we don't get to charge interest rates. So we might operate like a bank, but we don't get all the benefits that the bank does. We can't foreclose on their homes when they don't pay us back.
Okay, so there's a lot of people that you have to wait for the receivables to come in for a while, it sounds like.
Yeah, there's a long time period. So our merchandise, when we first started, when we were scaling, we started selling a local company out of St. Louis, and And it was easy. It was fun. But it brought with it a lot of problems. We didn't like their customer service.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually I realized if you just improve that customer service, just a fraction, why do we need anybody?
Mm.
We just need to source our own product, be our own brand.
Mm.
And that is a piece of what helps us scale. Being just an independent seller, we were never going to scale as high as we did and as high as we will. We have hundreds of distributors that sell our product. And without them, we would never be where we're at.
Got it. Okay.
So,
right. Yeah. So you said that the betrayal helped you rebuild your company. So what was the good stuff that came out of that then rebuilt your company to even greater success?
I'd say a lot of cultural rot. Like you look at that moment that happened, and it was you say, okay, we had to look at the team, and I said, what happened here? Can we save any of this? And does culture even matter? Like we looked at it and said, how did this happen? How embarrassed was I? I talk to business leaders all the time, and it is so embarrassing that this kind of thing happens, and nobody likes to talk about it, like you said originally. And it's one of those things like, can we patch this situation? Or is it one of those things where you have to pull the Band-Aid off and burn it all down? And with that specific team, we pretty much had to fire the entire team of eight people on that team, which it's not a ton of people by any means in an organization of 100 plus, but that was the entire sales team on that in that business division. And we had to start over essentially. And culturally, it sucked. It was awful, but it really drove into a word that I don't love, which is transparency. I love it because it should be inherent, right? It should be inherent in everything we do, but it clearly wasn't, right? And it made it really obvious that we needed to really hyper focus on our culture and what it meant to work at NVB, and that it was worth firing for. And if it's not a poster on a wall, at the end of the day, it has to be something that we hire for, we fire for, we live for, and people have to get behind it.
Okay. So how did you develop more transparency in your company after that?
We do a lot of events around our culture, and every integration of our core values, which we have 4 core values. We live a growth mindset, build a positive community, we pursue wow, and we commit as owners. And really driving home what all those mean to us on a daily basis, and also really reincorporating why it is that we're here. Why is it that what are we selling? What the hell are we even doing here? Why are we on this journey together? And for me, as an entrepreneur, I have my reason to sell to my customer. I have 2 customers. I have a child, and I have the adult or the community leader. And then I have my other customer, which is my employee. And I need to make sure that they all understand exactly why we're here and what we're doing for them. And as soon as we were able to better incorporate a system through HR, through a core value committee, through all of the building that we did, because it took a lot to get out of that garbage pit that we were in. It was a giant pit of endless. It felt really despair. You're in that moment, and you've just fired an entire group of people, and you go back to the rest of the company, and you say, "Hey, here we are now. Sorry that happened, but we can't admit anything to them. What happened?"
They knew something was up, but they weren't aware of the loss.
They didn't know the deep, dark secrets of it all, right? They knew the skim level surface.
They knew you were in a lawsuit, right?
Yeah. Well, eventually they knew we were in a lawsuit.
Everybody knew it can be public knowledge, right?
To a point, yes. But so it's just one of those things where, it's little bitty steps over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. And we stuck in a lull for sales for probably 2 to 3 years.
So it did affect you.
So yeah, we were at 18, maybe 22 or 23 million. And then all of a sudden we were over that hump, and the company was back on board with us. And now we're at this place where I can say that we used to be a hire fast, fire faster. And now we're a hire the right person and never fire.
Right. So you're really maybe doing background checks on people now, right?
I don't know what they do. That's an HR
Or
thing.
no.
I don't want to. I don't want to say what they do. I know Ben does a great job, and I don't want to be a part of
Right,
it.
right. It's not your job. Okay.
I could only be great at a few things.
So people understood something bad went on here because all those people got fired. And it's interesting. You would have thought that some of the people, because people talk, some of the people in that group, they would have known. Did they all know what was going on or not?
No, I mean, we obviously had to interview people at the time. And that's when, when we started to interview the rest of the organization, that's when a lot of those little pieces, those little missing things that you say, those red flags. And then it's like just more sensitivity in my brain about how I was a bad leader at the time. It's like, how did I miss this from happening? And all these red flags, we had created a system where one person was able to scheme the system because we didn't have enough checks and balances in place. So we had scaled to that level with no checks and balances. And that's what got us in that pit where we were. And, it was a big realization for me was, okay, now what? Now we've got to change the way we do things. We have to change the way we operate. We have to change the way we treat people. We have to change the way we love people. We have to change the way we train, onboard, everything.
And also you have to do more psychological testing, I'm guessing, so you don't get more sociopaths because they're everywhere, right?
We do a lot of psychological testing now before you're onboarded.
Although a lot of sociopaths can override those. So that's the bad news, right?
I'm sure they can. I have a lot of people that are clones of myself at this point.
Okay. So do you have some sort, it sounds like, there might be like after this, I would have a sort of initiative. If you see something, say something. Kind of like.
We did for a long time. I had a lot of anxiety and people didn't understand why. When somebody would lay a cell phone on a table, I would like, why are you doing this? What am I being set up for? Now, some people don't understand, like, it's not that I was being set up in some mischievous way. It was like, what's this person trying to set me up for? Like, what's the game? Yeah. I felt like I was always being trapped.
Also, the recordings are bizarre. It's almost like, let's just record everything. So if we ever need that, we can dig up something that we have it. If they have that many recordings, they might get you when you're annoyed one day. And that's like, oh, you're so abusive because you're annoyed. I mean, yeah, I can see.
Trust me, that those types of things happen, but you had managers from every level of the organization on those recordings. And, I learned all about how to store recordings and, the legalities of it all. It was a lot of fun. A lot of things I didn't want to learn about.
It sounds like it was quite traumatic. Okay. So you moved forward, you changed your culture, and, you had to eat some humble pie and get past that trauma because that's traumatic. And also there's the shame of how did I let that happen? It must be my fault, which really, I wouldn't say it's all your fault. I'd say things happen and could it have been better? Well, maybe. Okay, so things are better now. But what's interesting about what you do? You do sell joy because kids love playgrounds, right? And I know it's an industrial kind of thing, but in the end, it's not. It's selling fun for kids. So, that's a beautiful thing to do. What made you think about getting into playgrounds in the first place?
I wanted to work in my pajamas. Of course, like every entrepreneur, right? That's 18 years old, that didn't want to finish college. Now, I think one of my biggest goals is, like, as an organization, we're here to give kids confidence to take all those risks. We're not here to eliminate injuries on playgrounds by any means. I want to eliminate injuries as much as possible. But my goal as an organization for the child level is to make sure that they have confidence to take those risks, because that's how you create these adults that are super strong at a variety of things. When it comes to the parent and the community, I think that there's a lot of brokenness in communities right now. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for anybody that sells trust. And that is what we allow that community or that school. They're buying the trust from the parents. They're getting people to go back to a playground. That's how you learn your neighbor's name. That's how so many things happen in the world, is around a park and around a community like that. And then, on the lowest level with my teammates, just making sure that they have an opportunity to thrive in life, whatever that means for them. and I'm giving them a place to be able to do that. So that's why we do what we do.
Mm. Yeah, regarding parks and playgrounds, the memories of me and my children that we have, a lot of those are remember at that park and at this park, because we spent so in New York City, kids are in parks all the time because you can't keep them at home all the time. So we more places, I think that New York City children are in the playgrounds more than anybody else. But we remember the different I certainly have a lot of memories of my kids. It's not just the kids, it's the moms and the dads of remember that park and the slide and at this park and I met and also the community of the friends they met and also moms I met in parks and dads I met in parks. So definitely you are creating a lot of memories for children of their favorite park or even parks they're visiting. And because, even when we were
Yeah.
traveling, we'd always be looking for the parks because with kids, you have to always be looking for parks just in the break. So that's a beautiful thing. But when you said, I wanted to work in my pajamas, I would never have thought, gee, I want to work in my pajamas. I'm going to start a playground company. How did you get from I want to work in my pajamas to playground? Because normally people would say, well, I'm going to be a digital marketer or something like that, right?
Yeah, I thought I was, I picked an industry that so my dad was selling clothing at the time. He was in the apparel business. And a lot of those people were getting pushed out because a lot of the big box stores were going direct to the factories. And so you had an industry of salesmen that were transitioning.
Mm.
So for some reason, one of them went to playgrounds, and all of a sudden, all of them were going to playgrounds. I don't know why. So you had a lot of people from Izod Van Heusen and a bunch of different Carhartt and sock companies, and all these guys started selling playground equipment. A couple of them, their kids now still sell our brand. And I got in early with my dad. He was semi-interested, and I thought, okay, well, I'll do this for a little bit. This could be interesting. His idea of what it was and mine were two different things. And I started the online business, and I realized, our reach, I started with him. We were cold calling on customers. It was awful, terrible time. You grab a phone book and you start calling numbers. It's just it's fine, and I have respect for it, but it's just not what I wanted to do. I didn't think I'd have the reach. So I knew that I had to have a website, and then from there we just started building. And I had no idea what I was doing, but that's why my websites were not always the best. They were just good enough because I was doing a lot of the work myself.
But do you know what's interesting? I was just thinking this morning about the term good enough, okay? Because there's this child psychologist who wrote a book, and I can't remember her name, but she was talking about this other doctor who's a psychologist 100 years ago saying that, we don't want to be a perfect mother. We want to be a good enough mother. And apparently, and this has now come to the forefront, and she was highlighting this in her book, and I wish I could remember her name to give her credit, but I can't. I think it's called The 5 Principles of Parenting or something, the book she wrote. It was so interesting because no mom wants to think, oh, well, I'm just good enough, right? But what's interesting is this morning I thought, your life is not about being the best. Like, I have to be the best. It's you want to say, you know what? I have a good enough life. I'm a good enough business person. I'm not maybe the wealthiest business person because if you get into this thing that I have to be the best, there's only one person that is the best, right? And I'm not saying to be mediocre because we don't want to do that, but there is a point in our success journey where, if we were going to die tomorrow, what would we say? Well, I had a good enough life, not a perfect life. And it's not that you're not trying to be great. So about your websites,
they were good enough.
They were good enough because you're at 58 million is my
I get
point.
your point.
Get it? They were good enough. They were good enough, and it didn't matter. Yeah. But the thing is this, what really fascinated me was you created a new thing that people could click and buy playground equipment. I don't think anybody could do that before you. Am I right?
There was only one competitor when I came into the marketplace, and he went out of business as soon as the recession hit, which is right when I joined. So I was very fortunate, and then we had several years where we were uninhibited by competitors online, and that allowed us a lot of growth opportunity. And
so you got in at the right time. with your bad websites, which I'm joking about because people are so worried about what their websites look like. And
They are.
literally nobody cares if you can go on and find the product and buy it. And it's equipment. So this is not, this is a certain type of person buying equipment, right? They don't need a pretty website so much, right?
Our average customer only buys one playground in their whole life. So, maybe you're on a board for an HOA, right? And maybe you're fortunate enough to be there when they have to replace that. So we have a lot of our customers, I'd say our average customer has one buy their entire life. And now there's a lot of schools and parks and everything else, but there's a lot of people. So we have to do a lot of educating in this. So it doesn't have, your website never has to be perfect, no doubt, but it does need to be useful in our industry, it needs to be useful to people to really understand what it is that they are doing.
Of course, any website, people have to go on and say, what is this? They go on and it's not clear it's playground equipment, they'll leave. But what's good about this is I'm guessing they say, okay, we got to buy some playground equipment. Let's start Googling. They Google, and instead of having to go to some showroom, they can just click and buy right there. I guess that's what works, right?
Yeah, nobody thought we could do it. We had all of our competitors at the time back when we started. If you want to call them our competitors, now there are equivalents at some of them, but everybody thought you're never going to sell a $50,000 playground or $100,000 or a $500,000 playground online. And now that's the world we live in. If you're not online anymore, even in our industry, you're probably only doing about half the business you should be.
Right. Now, some people will want to go see the equipment first, probably, right? But it sounds like a lot of them just click and buy.
It is a lot of click and buy, but we do suffer from a little bit of a long sales cycle. So our sales cycle is a little unique. And, if you have a church, for example, you've got our average sales cycle is 100 days. You have committees, you have boards, you have government, you have processes. So we do a quote, even for our distributors. You're looking at 80 to 100 days before that turns into a sale. There's a lot of attribution issues when it comes to understanding the flow. The longest sales cycle that we ever had was 9 years. And that was from the time they received the catalog and we found it in some old antiquated system to the day that they bought it. And at 9 years from the time they called to the time it sold. So that is a lot of follow-up.
That is hilarious. They couldn't make up their mind. And all the committees are, no, do we really need a new playground? No, let's just keep using this one. Now let's talk about playground safety, because as a mom, I have always looked very carefully at the equipment. And I always think, gee, they could have done that better. I used to be a designer. So designers redesign everything. Okay. No matter what it is, where I would have done this. And sometimes I will see playground equipment and I'll think that's genius. That's so well designed. It's safe. But some of the designs aren't really that safe. I'm thinking they could have done that safer because that kid wouldn't have bumped their head if they had made it, longer. My kid got a concussion once.
Oh, really?
On a playground. And I looked at it and I thought, well, of course she got a concussion because it was designed. I thought they probably have a bunch of kids bumping their head on that. And I just thought, why on earth would they put that bar so low? Right. So it seemed like an obvious problem. My kid got a concussion because the bar was so low and she was a little kid too.
It's really interesting for sure.
Yeah.
I think that it's two-pronged there. So you have a lot of our designers in our industry are, older people, and they often don't have children anymore. I mean, we don't have the reproduction rate that we need as America. But anyways, you have a buyer and maybe it's a park department, right? Well, he's looking for a piece that is suitable for the relationship building. He's looking for a photo sometimes, and sometimes they forget functionality. And, they forget about those just really low level safety. This has to be better for the community, and they forget about designing it for the child. And it's pretty common nowadays to go down that direction. But another initiative that we've been doing ourselves, and that's kind of where we're scaling our next level of growth, is our monitoring. And our goal is around 15,000 playgrounds being monitored by our software over the next year. And,
Mm-hmm.
like if you're a parent, you'd scan that playground and you'd immediately be able to submit a report to that playground owner or operator. And they'd say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
my kid had a concussion, fix this.
Mm.
And we want
Oh,
that to
wow.
be instant. And that's our
Mm.
goal, is that, it's an instant level of communication. So you don't have 400,000 plus hospital visits every year, and that we can make kids that place where I said confidence. So your kid wouldn't have a concussion, or the next kid won't either, that they
Mhm.
would fix it. And that it
Right.
was actually something that they knew about, because the likelihood
Mm.
is they'll never know.
Well, that was the thing. I always felt like there's nowhere to give feedback. There wasn't a thing. There should be a sign saying, "Hey, if you have any feedback or then call us or let us know." But I always felt like it's here and we're just stuck with it. We got to really watch our kids to see if something is dangerous. Okay. But you missed something. And I thought, well, it is a pretty low bar. Right. And she hit her head really badly. So I love that you're also doing this. An AI should be able to monitor way better now. Right.
Oh yes. Yes.
Yeah.
There's a point in the probably the next 6 months where, as a parent, if you're able to take a picture of that playground, we should be able to tell that owner exactly how to fix it. If it's a priority that they need to fix in a month or 6 months or a day, or if they need to go over there and close it right now. So that software is in development as far as on the AI end of things in regards to that. So we're very close to a much safer world for, and a much, hopefully that will drive, again, community. You as a
Right.
parent will say, I feel like this is a great playground. The operator they fixed this problem. I bet next time you're
Mm.
back that maybe it's just barricaded off, or maybe it's gone.
No, it was just like one of the slides. The bar was just where they go to slide was too low. It should have been high so that they're not bumping their head on the bar, you know. But actually, the funniest playground faux pas that they did fix was, do you know Union Square in New York City?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know about that playground where they had the
No.
big dome? Okay. So they built this, they redid the playground. It was beautiful. Very nice. Okay. Lovely. They had a lovely slide that had like rocks and really nice. Everything was wonderful. And they built this big ball. Okay. And the kids could climb up the ball to the top and slide down. Okay. So what they did was they didn't realize that in summer, that ball got really hot and all the kids were burning themselves. Okay. That was the first thing. All right. The second thing was the ball was so high, kids were spraining their ankles and injuring themselves sliding down the ball. Okay. So what they had to do was they had to dig a hole a bit and make the ball be further down in the ground. Okay. So it wasn't as high. And they decided, okay, we're going to have to put a shade over it. So that's how they fixed it. But it seemed insane to me that they wouldn't consider the temperature of a metal ball in the hot sun in New York summers because it's hot. And also, it was still high even when they buried it more. I think they buried it another 2 feet. So it was, you know, further in. Even then, kids were not, maybe a few were kind of injuring themselves. And I thought that was insane to me. And I feel like what happens is you get these designers designing them because they're designer playgrounds, but they're not looking at the logistics. Is that happening a lot?
Yes, it's a big trend right now for sure in the industry. Is you want that signature series playground that's 40 feet tall, and you want to be able to have that showpiece for your neighborhood or your new city, and you have it. They put it up, and then there's problems.
Mm.
The city of there was a pretty famous museum here in Indianapolis, and they put up probably a $500,000 playground, and it was closed within a week.
Wow.
Similar issues, right? Too
Mm.
hot. Metal gets hot, and people. I don't
Mm.
know how a designer forgets that, but I think
Mm.
it's communication between the landscape architect and a park department or whoever owns it, and the owner says, I want it to be pretty, and
Mm.
it's like, okay.
And robust, but the other thing is also metal seats. They're still there. They're still hot, but it's, "Oh, well, we'll sit on it for a bit and we won't be able to sit there." That was insane because I started noticing parks because, yeah, I'm sort of a park aficionado, really. And I'd be like, well, they shouldn't have done that. And that was bad. And then there was another one where people were falling off the nets where they climb. A lot of kids were falling, but they had the nice foam, I like the foam, but even with the foam, it was still pretty far to fall, but it still is insane to me that not just in parks, but even at like the tennis center I go to, I'm in Florida. There are metal seats. We can't sit on those. We would burn ourselves.
Yeah, the sun does get a little warm down there, but yes.
Yeah. But even in New York City in summer, it's pretty hot. Well, this has been fascinating, taking us through the whole world of playgrounds. So what's next for your company, Nicolas?
I think, like I said, that software around safety, it is, for me, it is about building that community and really focus on that community end of things. The kid end of things, so making sure that kids have a fun place to stay, a confident place, build that confidence for that child. I think we're there, but making sure that we reestablish that bond between the community and the parents and the rest of it. I think that's my next goal.
Awesome. So there's real impact in what you're doing. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that. So what is you've been through a lot with your business. You're hugely successful. And of course, it was not without mishaps. What is one mindset you'd like to share with people before we close the show?
Well, I think you said it without saying it, but it's like progress over perfection, and for me, it's just always to keep on with the grit and not worry about if it's perfect, and just, I just keep on going. Nothing is ever perfect. Tomorrow, whatever's perfect today is not tomorrow. So that's the mindset I usually leave with people.
Awesome. And nothing is perfect and it will never be. So we should just give that up. Give it up. Well, Nicolas, thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you everybody for listening. If you like this, same thing, write a review, send it to people, and we'll see you on the next show.
You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jean Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jean Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.